So thanks everybody for coming today. I think this is our sixth session in the Professionals with a PhD. And we're really happy to have Emma. Am I saying your name right? Emma Gleadhill? Gleadhill?
Yeah, Emma Gleadhill.
Gleadhill, I do apologise. I've only ever seen it written down. But we're really delighted to have you here today. And Emma works in the Faculty of Arts. And Emma's going to show us a few things. We're going to hand off to Emma in a few seconds. Sally is also joining us here today. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Might help if I unmute myself. Yeah, I've got a bit of echo too. I'm having some issues this afternoon. It was good earlier. So yeah, I work with Catherine and with Miriam as the HDR Professional Schools Program Manager, and I've known Emma for a good while, and I've talked to her in the kitchen when we were sharing the building, and yeah, I thought interesting story. So yeah, I'm really pleased that you've joined us today, Emma.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here today, Catherine and Sally. I'm really looking forward to talking to you guys a bit just about my career since my PhD. And I know back when I was doing my PhD, there weren't really any sessions on what other options there were outside of the academic career, typical academic career trajectory. So. And it was something that I really wanted to learn more about towards my final year, especially because I was starting to think what's next for me. And, you know, you read some quite depressing things sometimes on the internet as well from people who talk about how difficult the academic job is and that sort of thing. But I guess I'm here today to tell you that you can have a very rich and fulfilling career post-PhD in that balances a bit of the professional space and the academic space, or, you know, that's what I've been able to do, and I think all of you would be able to as well if that's what you want. So yeah, I thought I'd approach this session a little bit differently today. So I think the other sessions have been more slideshow presentations. But I thought instead I might show you a few copies of my CVs and my cover letters and position descriptions of my different jobs, and just sort of step through my career through those. And I mean, it's been an interesting process just for me to go back to these documents and look at them in preparation for the session today. So I hope you find it helpful. Yeah, so I think and the other thing is, like, throughout this session, if you want to, you know, pose questions during it rather than at the end, feel welcome to do so, because I'm sure things will pop up. So yeah, definitely do that. And Catherine and Sally, feel free to jump in and ask me things while I'm going.
No problem.
Yeah.
We usually start with an acknowledgement of country. I'm never really timing this very well when it comes to delivering our sessions. But yeah, if I could do that and then maybe hand back to you, Emma, is that okay?
Yes, certainly.
Cool, thank you. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Macquarie University land, the Watamatical clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the dream time. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future. So thanks so much, and lovely intro, Emma. If you want to kick off and share your screen, and yeah, please, everybody, post your questions in the chat.
Okay, so I thought, first of all, I'll just start talking you a bit through a timeline of my career since graduation and how I got to where I am today. And then I'll start showing you some of those other documents. But I will start off just with my CV to talk you through these things, because, you know, it's got all the dates and things on it and I can't remember any of them. So I may as well use it to talk you through what I've done and remember myself. Yeah, so I went through, I'm actually from Melbourne originally, and I did most of my study at Monash University in Melbourne. So I did a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Visual Arts double degree. And then I did an honours degree in history. I started a Master's in Cultural Materials Conservation after the honours degree, which I found really interesting, but I think history was calling me. So the Cultural Materials Conservation, I thought it would be a good way to combine my interests in history and art together. But it was a lot more about the practical aspects of sort of risk management in museum collections and things like that, which weren't quite so much my interest. So, of course, the call of the PhD called me, and I went back to do my doctorate in history. So that's that. And so if we go to my life, I guess, since the PhD, what happened was I moved to Sydney just as I was finishing it off. And the reason for this was because my husband got a job in Sydney. So, yeah, I was a bit lost, I guess, when I arrived in Sydney. I didn't know many people here. I didn't have family here, and I had like one friend who had moved to Sydney also from Melbourne a year before, but that was about it. So it was quite a difficult time, you know, finishing off the PhD. I couldn't really get out there and meet people because I was busy, you know, doing all of that writing up at the end. But what I did do was I got in contact with a couple of academics who, you know, I knew a little bit, but not that well. And one of them was Claire Monagle, who's a historian at Macquarie University. And it was quite nerve-wracking contacting these people. You know, I was sending these sort of cold emails and not knowing whether they'd respond. And I mean, yeah, so Claire was wonderful though, and she invited me along to Macquarie University and to come along to some of the history seminars that were on every week here. So I started going along to those, and she also gave me a bit of work as a research assistant for her. So I was able to use some of those skills from my PhD in research, you know, to help Claire with writing up a couple of journal articles. So doing a bit of research for those, which was really good. And just to move my mind out of the PhD as well onto other projects. So in this time, a job came up at Macquarie University, which just an email had gone out to everyone here, and Claire flicked me through the email and said, oh, maybe this could be an option for you. Why don't you give it a go and apply? So it was just a casual job, and it was to implement the university's new pure research management system, to be part of the team that was implementing that. So this is when I just submitted my PhD, but I hadn't heard back the results yet. And, you know, it can take some months, like I think it maybe took about 3 months or something before I actually, you know, got those examiners' reports back. And it's a bit of a weird period where you're just sort of waiting around to hear and not sure what's happening. And also my like brain was really tired at this point from finishing my PhD. It is quite a stint at the end there, I think, for everybody. No matter how organised you are, there's always, you know, a bit of a stressful period right towards the end there. So, yeah, on this Pure project, mostly I was doing like data entry into the new system, which, you know, wasn't like that exciting, but I think at the time that was what I wanted. And it really taught me a lot about this new research management system. So the PUA system, it's where all of the academics in the university, where their publications data is collected. All of their grant data is also collected there. And they're also starting to, collect other data like about awards and things like that. So, and it's how, when you look up academics on the internet at Macquarie, it's PUA that puts together those profiles, or that they use to put together their research profiles. So I think from getting this job that was just sort of, not that exciting, doing data entry, I actually got to know a system that's very useful to everybody at the university. So it was just a short job, for a period. It was meant to be for a period of a couple of months, but then of course all of these sorts of projects end up going on for longer. So I think I had it for a bit longer than that. Yeah, from November to March.
So you're saying there that that kind of 3 months part of your after submission is a time for kicking back, or just doing something where you're not using that research anymore. You just want something completely different. You felt that was a really good transition.
Yeah, definitely. And just sort of turned my mind, I guess, to something else. And it was also moving to a new city. It was a way for me to meet people too. So I was working in quite a large team of people doing this data entry. And, we would have lunch together and talk. And so I just, got to know other people in the uni. And the other thing that happened was, while I was in the PUA team, there was a period where, I can't remember what happened, but we weren't able to do any work on PUA for a period. I think it was in a development phase or something, but they needed us to come back and do work on it. And so during that time, they needed help with, I guess, getting data ready for PUA, I think, in the research services post-award team. So myself and one of the other people from the PUA team, we were sent off to research services post-award team to do a bit of work there. And, that was just great, because I got to know everybody in that sort of post-award area, and I got to know about how university administration in that area works a bit, and to sort of see that side of the uni. So later on, a job came up in the post-award team, and of course I went for it. And I was lucky enough to get it. So it was a part-time role. And so I was able to continue on there after this PUA job. So I was in the post-award team, part-time for a bit. And then another job came up that was half in the contracts team and half in the post-award team. So that would make me full-time. And I went for that job and got that. And that allowed me to diversify my sort of experience even more into the contracts area, which was really good, and work in a whole nother team. And sort of while I had these part-time jobs, I was doing various other things as well. So one thing I was doing was I was working as a consulting historian. So this was actually through Claire as well. Someone had come to her about a company that just needed another historian on the team to do a bit of work for them. And what they were doing was a project where they were writing a history of Cranbrook School for their centenary, and they wanted to have some histories written of past students and things like that, so that they'd put up on their website. So I was doing a bit of that work on the side. And since then, I've, continued on to currently, and they've been doing work more recently in aged care. It's not so much right now in current circumstances, but in aged care facilities with this app they've created where the people, they can produce sort of profiles of the different residents of the aged care facility. And I, help write up little historical excerpts for that app about the residents' lives, which, is very rewarding work.
Emma, can I stop you there and ask you about that? I'm fascinated. Can you hear me? My internet connection says it's unstable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really fascinated in that because, I do the Resourceful HDR podcast, but I've thought if I did another podcast, I'd love to do one on residents of aged care or even in the community about, their lives because, there's such an untapped, stories there. Is that what you've found in this?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's some incredible, stories of people in Australia, and I guess, people have come from all over the place to live here as well. So very diverse stories and, fascinating histories. And
you wouldn't have thought you'd do that either, I guess. That the thing is, this is one of those serendipitous things that happen along in your career that you were open to that and have given that a go, and then you've continued to get this additional work.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, originally this wasn't, the original project they got me onto was this school history, but then, other projects developed from there. So, that's just been great. So it's quite a diversity of jobs. And then I've also worked as research assistants throughout this for various academics too. So Charlotte Greenhelg was an academic I knew back at Monash. I did things like getting image permissions for her book when she was getting that published, which is very difficult sometimes. I had to get some image permissions from Vogue, and I tell you, Vogue are very difficult to get image permissions from and quite expensive.
Imagine.
Yeah,
so that's, can I ask you about that then? Because that's a skill, isn't it? So what did you learn? How did you work that out?
I guess it was a bit of trial and error. I think I'm very good at it now. But yeah, you had to, luckily the publisher had sort of some, guidelines for obtaining the permissions. So I was able to follow those. But there were things like, there was one image in Vogue and I had no idea that you have to, so it was an advertisement that was in Vogue, and the advertisement was using a photograph by a well-known photographer. So I ended up not only having to get permission from Vogue, but also from the advertiser and from the photographer for that one image. Yeah, but I just sort of muddled my way through it and, learnt a lot in the process, which has given me skills now for, I've got my own book, which I'm going to be publishing shortly, and I need to get image permissions for that. So now I'll be able to do it a lot more easily.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds, I'm really looking forward to hear more about your book. But we do have a question in the chat. I wonder if we could pose it now while we're just looking at your employment experience here. Azal has asked, she says, "Hi Emma, interesting roles. Can I ask if it's usual for PhD graduates to apply for admin assistant role? I am very new to the HDR and would appreciate if you tell me a bit about your job descriptions in those roles. Thank you."
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's I think becoming more and more common for past PhDs to apply for administrative roles. Most of the team that were on that Pure project were other people who had recently finished their PhDs as well. So yeah, it's definitely quite common. And now that I'm in the administrative area, I find, you know, whatever team I'm working with, there's usually other people in the team who have done a PhD in the past. So yeah, quite common. And then in terms of talking through, yeah, my roles, I'll do that very shortly.
Thank you.
So then, I got this, the role in contracts and post-award. And then just in March last year, I moved into my current role, which is in the Faculty of Arts Research Office. So you can see I've moved back to, although at the moment I'm working a bit in busy times when there's grants, major grants rounds and things like that, I'll go up to more hours if they're able to, give them to me. But generally my job is 0.6 FTE, so just part-time. And I forgot to mention as well that I also had a junior research fellowship at the University of Sydney during that time as well, which was only 1 day a week. But again, I think with that, it helped that when I'd moved to Sydney, I contacted some people at Sydney University who I'd met at a conference and asked if there was anything, I could get involved in there. And they let me know about a writing group that was happening in my area in 18th century studies at Sydney Uni. And I joined that writing group and I did presentations at it and things like that. So I think it really is about making those connections. And when I've got jobs, I've got them because, I think partially people are aware that I'm there. I've made good sort of connections with people. I've also done a lot of cold, job applications. When I moved to Sydney, I just sent off my CV and, cover letter to a bunch of jobs at pretty much, all the different unis around, just in a sort of spree. And that wasn't very effective. So
actually, can I support you on that? So, people will say, oh, I haven't got a job, but they haven't put the effort into it. And really, you've illustrated, and knowing you, I know that you're just you're very personable and enthusiastic and open. And these are really good qualities to have. And you build relationships, you let people know what you're interested in. You just that is showing people that. And so when opportunities come up, they'll think, oh, Emma could do that. So, I just really want to say that, this is something, hopefully, the people here today, this is something we can really take from that because, that just saw before people saying, oh, LinkedIn's hopeless. I've gone in to look for a job and it's hopeless. And you go, oh, you've got to learn how to do these things. But also, Catherine and I just in a session this morning, and one of the things they talk about with relationships and connections and so on, patience is a key word there. You build those things and you have to do it without agenda, and then people start to think of you. And I've had things offered to me for that reason, but it's not just, oh, I'll go in and do this and now I've met this person, now can I have a job? And you've never really done that from, your description of your employment experiences.
Yeah, that's it's been interesting with this CV because I've been able to map it all out on here, but the actual process was very sort of spontaneous and one thing would lead to another and you wouldn't know where it would lead. So I think that's why it's really important to sort of go for any opportunities that are out there, even if they seem, quite small. Because that Pure role was only meant to go, I think it was either 2 or 3 months. It was a very short role and, it was data entry. But look at everything else that it has led to for me at the university. So I just don't overlook things. Would be a piece of advice. So yeah, in terms of the pure role, yeah, it was mostly data entry. And then I also, towards the end, I started going out and training academics in how to use the pure system, because I had a very good knowledge of it, you know, from doing all that data entry. So that they were the main sort of responsibilities of that role. So this is just an example of my very first cover letter that I did, that was actually accepted, you know, that I got a job out of after finishing my PhD. I sent off a lot of cover letters to various positions. So,
Emma, do you think you could make that a bit bigger? I'm on a small screen.
Yeah. And now I look at it and I'm like, there's probably various things I would have done differently, but obviously it was effective. So yeah, it's very hard when you finished your PhD to try and turn, you know, your skills to a different role. So I think you can see a bit of my maybe struggle to do that in the in the cover letter. Yeah.
Can you tell us about, like you said, I would do things differently. I know for myself, I look back at job applications and go, oh, I would have written this, I would have written that. So can you tell us, looking at that, if you were sort of almost going through that with us, and to say how you might write it differently now that you have these insights?
Yeah. I mean, I think the opening lines are quite good. I think it's good to have something quite friendly there. And yeah, so I think that's okay. I think I wouldn't have brought up my examiner's reports and everything of my PhD, you know, straight up. I think I would have gone into my skills rather than sort of, oh, look at me, I've got my PhD. Which is a wonderful, you know, achievement and something that should be celebrated. But we have to remember the purpose of this is to get a job in, you know, a pure research management system, data management role. So this is not the most relevant, you know, piece of information here.
Yeah. And actually there's this saying in journalism, they talk about don't bury the lead. So that's what people often do in these. And if you think about an abstract or something about research, you wouldn't talk about that right at the end, you know. So that's a really good tip, that you know, what's the job about? What are they looking for? Hit them with that, because particularly if you're going outside of public service or universities, they may not even read any further. So you've got to grab their attention, not in a tricky way, but just saying, yeah, I see what the job's about. Here's what I can offer you.
No, I think what I would have instead brought up is the fact that I'd been doing work as a research assistant, and also in my work in my PhD, that I've been using EndNote, which is a data system that collects publication data. You know, I use it personally. I'm sure a lot of you use it in your own research or use other referencing, you know, systems. And, you know, it's very similar to how, you know, references are tracked in Pure and how the data is entered. So I think it would have been much better if I'd instead brought up my skills in using EndNote here and my experience with knowing what's required when you're referencing sources, what sorts of information is required, you know, the publisher details, the date of publication, different types of publications, whether they're edited collections, or, you know, chapters in edited collections or books or journal articles. I think that's more what I should have brought up. But yeah.
I can see things that you've weaved in here in terms of what I see familiar in selection criteria that are often put up in job ads at the university. Like, you know, when you talk about your teamwork skills and being your ability to juggle multiple deadlines.
Yeah, so that's definitely what I always do with my cover letters, is I go through the selection criteria And even if there is a separate, sometimes there's a separate part where you need to attach another document specifically addressing the selection criteria, but at other times they just want it all in the cover letter. So this was one where they wanted it all in the cover letter, and I just step through it usually, just, you know, in the order that they've put it, you know, make it easy for them so that they can just go through and tick off whether you've got those abilities or those skills.
Making it easy for the hiring manager to review is a really good tip. Even just putting things in order, because they'll be looking at multiple applications to find, you know, how have you applied to the selection criteria. And even if it's out of order, but you've got multiple applications, it can be a real struggle to get through them.
And this was my CV that I put together back then for that job. And you can see here, the other CV I showed you at the start was my academic CV. So you would have seen that up front I had more my awards, my publications and that sort of thing. Whereas you'll see for my professional CV, even though this is a very sort of early form of it, I put my employment and experience up front, rather than, you know, my and my training as well in these different systems. And then I've got my awards, grants and scholarships and things at the bottom rather than at the top, and papers. So yeah, just thinking, if with every job you go for, thinking about what they're after, and even not just sending off exactly the same, you know, cookie cutter CV to every job, just shifting things around a little bit depending on how relevant they are, is important. So yeah, and at that point I didn't have a lot of employment and experience like you saw in my later CV, but what I did have was this research assistant work, and that I'd done teaching basically throughout the PhD. I did a lot of teaching, as you can see there.
Yeah, really good.
And again on that, with the teaching, if you're looking to something outside, okay, even within the university, even if it's a professional role, people still recognise the value of teaching and what you might gain from that. But that's where, if you're going to another role in a different sector, you need to actually maybe write it differently and present what the value, what you have that you gain through teaching. It could be your organisational skills, it could be a whole range of different things that actually translates to what they're after. So
yeah, so then this is the job that came up in the post-award. So if you go for a job, you know, they'll always have a position description. And, you know, I always print that off, highlight things, you know, scribble on it. So that's what came up for this job. So you can see here, I think there was a question about the, you know, what my position was there. So, yeah, I had a manager, post-award manager. Okay, so yeah, there was the manager, Samira, who was my manager of post-award and reporting. And then underneath her, there was Phyllis, who was the leader of my team, my post-award team. And then I worked with other post-award officers. And then I was here at the bottom, the post-award administrative assistant. Yeah, that's that. And yeah, we've got down here, you know, they have this list of key accountabilities. So I always make sure to try and address those when I'm going for a job. And, you know, that's them there. So, and this is pretty much what I was responsible for in the job. So, yeah, I guess I assisted researchers, yeah, with the management of their research projects, and the records of their research projects. So again, that's the records in this pure research management system that I'd had the training in. So basically in post-award, you know, academics are awarded grants, but then what happens after they've got them? Like they have to do the project, and they have reporting responsibilities to whoever has given them the funding. And then we as a university have reporting responsibilities to the government about this sort of grant funding. So in post-award, I was responsible for maintaining all of those records and for helping academics with meeting their reporting requirements as well, and their milestones. So yeah, it was quite a it was a really good job, but it was more about well, not policing, but you know, it was keeping everything in check, like making sure that everything was getting done, and having to chase people up sometimes if it wasn't. I also had to get a really good knowledge of all of the different funding rules and guidelines of all of the different funding bodies that anyone in the, because this role wasn't just in Faculty of Arts, it was a central role across the whole uni. So that, you know, the ARC and NHMRC are the main, you know, Commonwealth government funding sources, but then also any other groups that academics may have, you know, had grants from. So, and yeah, just making sure that everything was compliant. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed there, Emma, is that I feel like you've almost come full circle with, you know, having a PhD, then seeing how it actually works in pure, you know, being that facilitator of awards, and now, you know, in your current role, you've kind of gone behind the veil in a few different ways. You've seen so much that happens in the background.
Yeah, definitely. And I just feel like, yeah, I know so much more about it now, which helps me even in my own academic work. Like, it means that I know where my efforts are perhaps best placed in that area, and I'm not wasting time sort of, you know, going down dead ends or whatever. But yeah, at the same time, I've been able to bring my background in academia to this role, so that, you know, I know what's behind all of this reporting that's going on, the great research which is happening, and I care about it, and I'm excited about it. Yeah. Yeah, so that's, yeah.
You have a question, Meryl, I think.
Yes, thank you so much. Emma, oh, wow, wonderful presentation and so much networking there. That's just such a great example. Very specifically, could I just get just a couple of quick things? When you were saying earlier that you had sent a lot of, you know, sort of unsolicited, you know, letters saying, look, here I am and I could work for you. Yeah. And you mentioned that wasn't always successful, but can I just confirm that is what got you the job with Claire Monagle?
No, so Claire Monagle, that was a research assistant role, and so that was just her, you know, she has had, you know, grant money, and she was able to use that money towards employing a research assistant to, you know, help with some of her work. So for that job, it doesn't go through, you know, a formal process or anything like that.
So that was a networking thing.
Yeah, okay. So that was networking, and her knowing that I'd moved to Sydney and, you know, didn't have any work or really know anyone. I think she was sort of giving me a bit of an olive branch as well.
Absolutely, no, it was wonderful. It's led to so much, but also I'm really interested in hearing, if you've got a minute, about how I'm imagining. When you mentioned your book, I'm imagining, so that is your PhD, you know, come from your PhD thesis. And I was just wondering how that's gone time-wise with your work, and whether you have a supervisor helping you with that, or, you know, how you're managing that process.
Yeah, so it's evolved over, so when did I graduated at the start of 2017. Finished the PhD end of 2016. When I finished, I think, as I mentioned, I was sick of everything. I couldn't stand looking at my PhD, to tell you the truth. I just, I'd had enough. But I did have very positive examiners' reports, which had, commented that I should publish it as a book, and they'd recommended a couple of publishing houses. So they'd recommended Manchester University Press was one, and then Bloomsbury was another press. So I had that in the back of my mind, but I was just, and I knew, because they'd also made recommendations in their reports of what I would need to do to turn it into a book. And I think one of the reports was, reasonable length, but the other was like maybe 12 pages or something. And at the time, I looked at all of that and I was like, I just can't, I can't do all this. I'm not interested. But since then, those 12 pages have been, invaluable. But it took me a while to get back to it. So, it wasn't really until I went back to being part-time again in March last year, with the role in the Arts Research Office, that I had the headspace to go back to the PhD and turn it into a book. So for that, I looked up the two publishers that they'd recommended. I also asked other people about them. I ended up going with Manchester, it's more a university press, whereas Bloomsbury is more a trade press. And I mean, both have their, value. But I think my book was framed a bit more academically, and I think it just suited Manchester a bit better. So although I was tossing up with Bloomsbury because my research uses a lot of images, and as a trade press, they publish these beautiful books with like incredible images. So, so Manchester, I went onto their website and looked up what you needed to do, got their guidelines and everything, and I did have in the back of my mind, so this is again this thing about networking. When I was at a seminar like earlier the year before, I was talking to an academic about, potentially putting forward a book proposal to Manchester because his book had been published by Manchester. And I was like, do you have any advice? And then he said, well, actually, I'd recommend to just look up the list of editors on their website, find the editor that's in your area, and just send them an email and ask them, before you even put anything together, send them an email and ask them if they're interested in your topic. Which hadn't even crossed my mind. I thought that you'd need to just prepare like the whole document straight away. But this is just another thing that saves you from doing misplaced effort and misplaced work. What if you'd put together this whole massive book proposal and then sent it off to the publisher and they're just like, well, that's not an area that we're focusing on at the moment. We're not going to publish it. I'd recommend to do that, definitely, if you're looking at publishing your thesis as a book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks, Emma. Yes, I've got a friend who's going through this exactly at the moment, and she hasn't done that. So it'll be the first thing I say to her. But yes, I'm due to submit in December, and my supervisor's indicated that she thinks it would be something that she would like me to be very active about, further book proposals and so on. But this is great actually, because I'm getting a bit of an idea of what what can be done part-time. You know, I had imagined, oh my goodness, well, this will be full-time, so can I work at the same time? So yeah, that's extremely helpful. And just sensible things like, yeah, approaching the editor, it's just not something you would necessarily think of, but when someone points it out, it's like, oh, that's quite helpful. So yeah, thank you very much.
And you just learn all these things from talking to people. So, you know, sometimes you're so busy and you think, I don't have enough time to be, you know, talking to people, and I have all these things I need to get done. But sometimes it can save you time, like just to know information, valuable information. So then at this point, yeah, I went for the full-time role. Which I guess I'd always done bitsy jobs here and there. I'd never had a full-time, you know, position in the professional area. And I just felt like, you know, it was something that I wanted to do. And I was interested in the contracts aspect as well. So what I've done, I didn't do it with those first two jobs, but since then with this job and then also with my Faculty of Arts job, I've just taken a PDF of the website, you know, advertisement. And that's really helpful for looking back. If you want to track things in the future, you can look back at exactly what was on the website, the selection criteria and, you know, all of that. So I'd recommend to do that as well. So that was the ad. Yeah, sorry, Catherine?
So they take down the job ad and then you can't go back.
Yeah, yes, because that's the problem. Very soon after you've applied, they'll just take down the ad, and then yeah, you can never check later on. It disappears, never to return. So definitely PDF it. I think with the other ones I'd printed them, so I did have my own copies, but the printed copies have long gone. Like, yeah, I PDF now. Learning from administration, I PDF, you know, everything. You know, I've learned how to keep accurate records from my post-award and contracts roles. Oh, I didn't show.
I still haven't learned.
So,
Emma, did you see there's a question there from Leanne?
No.
I do. Or can you see that, Emma?
No, it's a bit hard. Maybe if you can tell me the question.
Yep, I'll let out. Just in terms of the roles that you've had that are like 3 days a week, is that how they were advertised or something you've negotiated? Are they because of a job share situation? I'm very interested in part-time work, but wasn't sure if it was common to find those positions advertised.
Ah, yes. Yes, so they were advertised as 3 days a week. Yeah, for all those, the part-time and full-time job, they're all advertised at that FTE level. And I think it's quite common to find part-time jobs in research administration as well. So I don't think you'll have trouble finding them. Yeah, so you should have that opportunity to do things part-time if you want. But you can see here, for this job, rather than just the cover letter, they also wanted a response to the selection criteria. And that was the same with the post-award job as well. It was only the pure one where they didn't want that. And I think that was because the pure one was a casual role, whereas these roles were permanent roles. So a bit more was required. But you can see I just simply laid out in headings each of the selection criteria and then just wrote, you know, a few paragraphs underneath addressing each of those. Another thing, always great to collect, you know, quotes from people if, you know, they've had a good experience with you. It's a bit like, I mean, yeah, it makes you feel good anyway, but I have a folder in my email and it's just called positive feedback. And if anyone sends me an email saying, thanks a lot, Emma, or whatever, I just throw it in there. And yeah, so these tutoring one though, they were from the university's student evaluation reports. So I also kept copies of all of those. but sometimes a good quote or whatever can do a lot for you.
I love that. That's a great idea. Anytime you're feeling a bit down as well, you can go back to it.
Yeah, exactly. If you're having a bad day and thinking, and you've had some negative, feedback or something, you could think, well, actually, I'm doing pretty well overall.
Exactly. Think of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
There's another question there in the chat from Yvonne. I'm not sure if you can see that. So hi Emma, thanks a lot for your sharing. I'm wondering whether those non-academic roles that you've worked for before were only available to PhDs or was available to any degree holders, and what competitive advantages do we PhDs have compared to other degree holders if we'd like to get something like a non-academic professional position like you?
Yeah, so they're available to everyone. None of them were restricted to PhDs at all. But yeah, I think I've shown that, I guess it's about how you frame your PhD, and rather than starting up front with I have a PhD, I got positive examiners reports, think about the skills that you've built in doing that PhD. Are there certain systems that you've used to complete it in collecting your data and analysing your data that might show that you're very capable of using systems like that in an administrative role? And I guess to do a PhD, you already have to have very high skills in sort of collecting data, analysing data, and coming up with an original contribution. And like that's all important to administrative roles as well. Those skills you can apply them anywhere. So yeah, I think just framing it a bit more around the skills you've developed.
Yeah, great. Okay. We're almost near the end. We've just a few more minutes. We're having some great questions come through from everybody. Just something myself I'm wondering, Emma, in terms of like along the way, in terms of your thoughts about your career, did you have any specific ideas? Were you guided by your supervisor? Did any of those kind of career conversations come up?
Yeah, it actually, in my final year, I was getting a bit concerned about what lay next. And I mentioned this to my supervisor, and he'd supervised a lot of students before me. So he was, a very experienced supervisor. And he said, look, it always surprises me. I can never predict which students are going to be successful as academics and have an academic career pathway, like traditional trajectory, and which students won't. And then he said, because it depends so much on what comes up in the particular few years after the PhD that you're looking for that academic position. And everyone to do a PhD goes into such, niche areas because you need to make your original contribution. But it may mean that, sometimes nothing will come up in your area for a few years. It can be like that. And so I think if you're passionate about it, just try and keep it up. At the same time as building skills in other areas, and have fun along the way as well. Don't sort of restrict yourself to the sort of one area that you focused on in your PhD. Expand your horizons a bit into other things.
I think it's great. I mean, I loved hearing about all the the networking you did, your connections, just knowing, being, a good, nice person to know, and, reaching out to those nice contacts again, resulted in so many opportunities. And I think sometimes, the networking thing, we always think, it has to be a particular way. It has to be, a LinkedIn connection, or it has to be somebody I've given my business card to. It's often just, building good relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of the fun of it as well, you know, the unexpected and not knowing what's around the corner and what sort of opportunities and interesting things to explore will come up through these. So, yeah, I'm now working on some, I've submitted a co-authored journal article, you know, with a friend that I'd met at a conference years ago and kept up with. Because we just have similar research interests, and you know, that just came from keeping in contact with her. So yeah, I think in both arenas, professional and academic, it's very important.
Sounds like you have so many exciting things ahead, Emma, you know, with the book and, you know, your co-authoring, and like there's so many opportunities you're able to tap into post PhD. It's fabulous to hear that, and the you know, your professional roles on top of that as well. So thank you so much for your time today. We're just almost up to the hour, but is there any further questions anybody may have? Feel free to unmute yourself. I'm going to give it 60 seconds, maybe uncomfortable silence.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity. You don't always get this one. Emma's very generous.
One thing I will, am I off mute? Yes. Emma, could I just, sorry, this is probably a little bit of a practical question. As far as, could you tell me, my Pure profile has actually just gone up excitingly because I got my first publication, it has now been accepted. Who would be the best person for me to contact as far as learning how to, you know, put information up there about myself and stuff, to just sort of, you know, flesh out the little profile that I have?
Yeah. Which faculty are you in, Mary?
In arts, in the Department of English.
What I can actually do is I can send you, arts actually have a style guide, a profile style guide, which tells you the sort of information, you know, to put on there. I can email it to you.
Oh, thank you, Emma. That'd be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I've just jotted down your name so I can email it to you after this.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. It's been a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you for having me here today. It's been a really interesting exercise for me as well, because I haven't actually thought, you know, back to how I went about doing these things before.
Yep. Yeah, you're a model for all the stuff that I will talk to people about in career development, because, you know, I put in the chat that, you know, there's research around being comfortable with uncertainty, you know, can often lead to career success, because you haven't decided what career success, you know, it's not prescriptive, it's just more like values driven. And so that's what you've really done. You've gone on, I'm looking for things that are interesting to me, that fit with my values, and then something come up, I'll give that a go. And then from that leads to the next one. I often do this little drawing where it's like a series of just a stick figure and there's hills in front. You can't see over the hills. So you have to go over one hill to see what the next hill, what's behind that hill. And that's, you know, how your career has unfolded. And it's not aimless. You know, you have a very clear understanding of yourself and what matters to you. And then when things turn up, you also aren't, because if we look at that position description, the first one was a Hugh 5 and it's Hugh 6. Now people could go, oh, but I've done a PhD, I should earn more. The thing is, you'll get there, and that's, you're just constructing it, you know, it's a lot of, you know, theory around that too, career construction and the constructivist approach. So, you know, it's that thing of going, oh, I should earn this much money because I have a PhD, and you've just closed all these doors, you know. And so this way you're opening doors, and they will eventually get you to somewhere where you are anymore. But then I can see that you would go, sometimes you might take a downward step, a sideways step, because there's an opportunity that you go, oh, that's great. I will manage, you know. So yeah. I think you're a great illustration.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, this whole, it's not, you know, a straight horizontal, you know, path or whatever. You can piece different bits of things together, and all the while you are actually progressing.
Yeah, it's great.
So much, Emma. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. I really enjoyed the session, and I think we took so much out of it. Even seeing the position description, the cover letters, your resume, all really heavily, like very practical things. And you've helped Meryl here directly as well. So great session. You're very welcome, Emma, to come over and visit us in the new building. And we'll see you soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.